In 1985, a British inventor convinced millions that a three-wheeled plastic pod would revolutionize transport. Within months, it became a punchline. Clive Sinclair wasn't some fringe dreamer. He'd already reshaped consumer electronics across Britain. His computers had sold millions. His name meant innovation. So when he announced the C5 in January 1985, the tech world listened. The promise was seductive: an electric vehicle that would cost less than £1,000, seat one person, and transform urban commuting overnight. The media frenzy was instant. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was the future, shrink-wrapped and ready for the pavement. But here's what nobody talks about. The C5 was never designed as a car. Legally, it wasn't one. Sinclair had engineered a loophole. By classifying it as a motorized tricycle, it sidestepped automotive regulations entirely. No crash testing required, no safety certification, no seat belts, no airbags, just plastic bodywork, a small electric motor, and a rider position that left you exposed to every lorry on the M25. The brilliance was cynical: avoid the rules, slash production costs, and move the liability onto the buyer. Specifications sounded ambitious: a 12-volt electric motor, a range of around 20 miles per charge, a top speed of 15 miles per hour. On paper, it promised the perfect solution for short urban trips, but there was a fatal flaw nobody discussed during the launch hype. The C5 was devastatingly underpowered in real-world conditions. Hills became mountains, headwinds became obstacles, and British weather, rain turned the battery into a liability. The motor's performance degraded in cold, wet conditions, which, if you live in Britain, is basically always. Then there was the ergonomic nightmare. The C5 positioned its rider in a recumbent position, leaning back, legs stretched forward. It looked futuristic. It felt vulnerable. You were essentially lying down in traffic, your head at bumper height, your visibility compromised, your ability to react severely limited. A pedestrian or cyclist had better sightlines. A motorcyclist had better protection. The C5 offered the worst of both worlds: the exposure of a bicycle with the fragility of a golf buggy. Marketing, however, was where Sinclair truly miscalculated. The launch campaign positioned the C5 as a lifestyle revolution: sleek, modern, environmentally conscious. The problem: the actual product looked ridiculous. Photographs don't lie. The C5 resembled a plastic bathtub with wheels. It was egg-shaped. It was diminutive. It was, frankly, embarrassing to ride. No amount of advertising copy could overcome the moment a consumer actually saw themselves in one, pedaling through suburban traffic like a man in a glorified shopping trolley. Pre-orders told a different story than the hype suggested. Sinclair had expected around 250,000 units to sell within the first year. The actual number: fewer than 5,000 were ever produced, and even fewer were actually purchased by genuine consumers rather than curiosity seekers or journalists. The disconnect between Sinclair's confidence and market reality was staggering. He'd built a future nobody wanted. What's particularly instructive about the C5 collapse is how it mirrors modern startup failures. Sinclair had solved a technical problem, building an affordable electric vehicle, without solving the human problem. He'd assumed that innovation plus affordability plus environmental benefit automatically equals demand. He was wrong. People don't buy products based on specs. They buy based on identity, safety, and social acceptability. The C5 failed on all three counts. There's also the matter of Sinclair's personality. He was a visionary, but not a pragmatist. He believed so deeply in the C5's potential that he seemed blind to its obvious flaws. When criticism emerged, he didn't iterate or improve, he doubled down. That stubbornness, which had served him well in the computer industry, became a liability in automotive manufacturing. He'd built a legacy on being right about the future. The C5 was the first time he was catastrophically, publicly wrong. The safety incidents didn't help. Within weeks of public availability, reports emerged of C5 riders being struck by cars, tipped over by strong winds, and stranded on hills unable to pedal back down. One particularly grim incident involved a C5 being hit by a lorry on a dual carriageway. The driver survived, but the narrative was set. The C5 wasn't just impractical, it was dangerous. Insurance companies grew nervous. Public opinion turned hostile. What had been positioned as the future became a cautionary tale. By late 1985, Production had effectively ceased. Sinclair had invested heavily in tooling and manufacturing capacity based on his optimistic sales forecasts. Instead, he was left with unsold inventory, negative press, and a severely damaged reputation. The company that had pioneered affordable computing had just proven it couldn't translate that success into automotive manufacturing. The gap between vision and execution had swallowed millions. What happened to the remaining C5 is almost poignant. Some were scrapped. Others found their way into museums and private collections, where they sit today as artifacts of spectacular ambition. A handful of enthusiasts still maintain them, treating the C5 with the reverence normally reserved for cult classics. But these aren't people who use them for transport. They're people who understand the historical significance of failure. The broader lesson is this: the C5 wasn't a technological failure. The engineering worked, the motor functioned, the batteries charged. The problem was that Sinclair had solved the wrong problem. He'd asked, how do we build an affordable electric vehicle? Instead of asking, what do people actually need from urban transport? Those are fundamentally different questions, and they require fundamentally different research. Sinclair's subsequent attempts to defend the C5 only deepened the embarrassment. He claimed the British public simply wasn't ready for such innovation. He blamed the weather. He blamed cultural conservatism. He blamed everyone except himself. This defensive posture, so different from his usual confidence, revealed something crucial about visionary founders. They often can't accept that their vision might actually be flawed. Admitting error would mean confronting the possibility that their judgment, their core asset, was compromised. C5's failure had lasting consequences for Sinclair's empire. His credibility, which had been nearly unassailable in tech circles, was now questioned. Investors became skeptical. His subsequent ventures struggled to gain traction. Within a few years, Sinclair Research had essentially ceased operating as a major innovation force. One spectacular failure had eroded decades of accumulated trust. That's the hidden cost of launching something truly terrible into the world. Interestingly, the C5 now occupies a strange space in technology history. It's not remembered as a minor misstep. It's remembered as the ultimate symbol of tech hubris. It appears in lists of worst products ever. It's referenced whenever someone launches an overconfident startup. It's become a cultural shorthand for visionary who forgot about users. Sinclair's worst product has become his most famous one. That's a peculiar kind of immortality. The C5 also predates modern electric vehicle adoption by decades. Tesla, Nissan, and others eventually solved the problems Sinclair couldn't: range, speed, safety, social acceptability, and charging infrastructure. They succeeded partly because they didn't try to cut corners on regulation or safety. They invested in understanding what customers actually wanted. The irony is that Sinclair's vision, affordable electric urban transport, eventually became real, just not in the way he imagined. So what's the ultimate takeaway? The C5 teaches us that innovation without empathy is just engineering. That being first doesn't matter if you're wrong. That a founder's track record doesn't guarantee future success. And that sometimes the gap between vision and reality isn't a bridge you can build, it's a chasm you fall into. Sinclair saw the future. He just forgot to check if anyone wanted to live there. Subscribe for the full autopsy on tech's most spectacular failures. New case studies every week.